Alright, so today's video we're going to be talking about different stages of development. So this video we're really going to focus on infancy to early childhood. So as we start, we're talking about the development of a newborn. So we know that begins in the womb, in the belly, through the process of pregnancy. That's kind of outside the scope of this video. We do a weekend intensive training on pre and postnatal, so we'll really be diving into it now. But this video is more of just an overview of that developmental stage in life. So when we do have a baby growing inside and we're practicing yoga and we're very aware of our nutrition and the outside stimuli, music, voice, environment, comfortability, safety, making sure that we're in a place that's not too anxious or depressed, providing this environment for this baby as the movement, the behavior begins to grow. So that starts in the womb, during pregnancy, as the relationship with the baby begins to develop. Then it moves forward. So in infancy, the brain begins to develop. We have these little babies who are coming into the world and they don't have very much function, don't have very much control of the body, don't have very much control of what's going on in the mind or what's happening. The senses are all developing. So, and we found that the brain is so plastic, it's always changing. So this experience for babies is built as the brain develops, as these neural pathways develop, the pruning of the nervous system. So, as we do this, as we begin to explore yoga with an infant, with a very young child, we bring to them this idea of two of the 8 limbs, the social awarenesses and the self-awareness. Our study of yoga as the parent, as the caregiver, maybe as the child care, like at a daycare, or whether it's an early childhood development teacher that you are, or maybe you're just a yoga teacher getting to experience these moments with children, but we're there for this development. And the deeper that we go into our studies, the deeper that we embody this, we can present it to them. So with babies, it's this constant learning, this constant pruning of the brain, of those pathways between experience and connection. And experience, telling them, like, babies are born with certain reflexes, a sucking mechanism, so that when something touches their face, they have the reflex to turn their head and then the reflex to suck, which allows them to eat before the experience of breastfeeding or the experience of bottle feeding gives them a connection to being nourished, to food. So we're born with these innate reflexes, but as we grow, we develop these connections in life, and each experience ties the brain to a connection, and those neural pathways begin to form. And it develops more and more over time. And then we move into this idea of the dynamic systems theory, which is the link between perception and action. So infants must perceive something in the environment that motivates them to act. And then that perception to fine-tune the motor skills. So a baby looking across a room and wanting to walk over to mom. And then they have this goal of walking, and they have this perception, and then it motivates them. I want to be over there. I want to be next to mom. So then they accomplish this big goal. So tuning into those things as a parent is the practice of yoga, or as a caregiver, or as a yoga teacher for these small children, recognizing these developmental stages as they move along. Even in young babies, we see the vision begin to develop. So as we talk about how yoga practice can affect different developmental stages, we think about infants, and obviously we don't have infant yoga classes. What we mean by that in terms of that is the mother practicing with baby. But babies seeing and connecting and making these experiences connect in their brain with feeling good, with mom experiencing breath, with mom being relaxed, with mom taking these postures. They begin to see that. And then they begin to make a connection with that experience to what that means for mom, what it means for their relationship with them, what it means to bend and wiggle around on the mat. So we begin to give them this experience as they begin to see and visualize and make these connections. And then each goal that they accomplish is so large. Each developmental stage is huge. So tuning into our understanding of that, tuning into understanding these developmental stages are going to help solidify this relationship, help form the connection between new mother and baby, or caregiver and child, or yoga teacher and student per se, even if you're working with mom and baby. Recognizing these goals and finding these motor skills begin to develop. So with babies, the gross motor skills move from the fact that they can't control their posture at all, can't hold their head up, don't have the ability to really move the limbs, the trunk, really anything. You know, we have these little tiny babies who are so delicate, and then they learn to hold their head up, and then they learn to sit independently, and then to stand, and then eventually to walk. Then they learn this concept of where is safe. Where is it safe to crawl? Where is it safe to walk? So we do a lot to protect infants in that stage by baby-proofing the house and making sure there's baby gates by the stairs and this and that, but there's been scientific studies where babies have learned depth perception. They put them in a room where it looks like the edge of a cliff, like a clear glass, and even with the mother trying to get the baby to crawl across, they end up stopping. So we do everything we can to protect our babies, but this is also beginning to develop too, this sense of safety. Where is safe? So as we can see, these are monumental developmental milestones that are going on. And the more and more we share the practice of yoga, which as we know is not just asana, it's understanding our social awareness, our self-awareness, our body position, our focus, our perception, our ability to connect with the outside world. There's so much that's accompanied in the study of yoga that we, as the educator, whether that be, again, parent, caregiver, yoga teacher, aunt, uncle, influential person in this child's life, we begin to recognize that and to bring our awareness of the practice of the vast science into their life by exposure, experience, and connection, experience and connection, experiencing us doing yoga, experiencing us practicing those awarenesses. Babies beginning to see that, babies beginning to make those connections. And then as children, we grow up. In the second year, our gross motor skills start to develop and become finer and finer and finer. These goals that we have as they develop, we begin to develop more fine motor skills, finger dexterity. It allows us to begin to eat food a little bit easier, stack blocks, do more learning. So as we as educators, as we as leaders, we facilitate these developmental stages in young children, and that's how we bring yoga to them. We facilitate them watching us. We facilitate that experience so they can make a connection between the vast science of yoga, between the practice of yoga, and what it can mean for their life, what it can give them. And are they understanding that at 2 years old and understanding the impact? Obviously not. But they're seeing it and they're making these connections. And it's such a beautiful process to just, when we talk about doing yoga with infants and even 2-year-olds, it begins to get a little bit harder when they start moving around and walking and running and all of these different things that we know toddlers grow up to do. But when we talk about yoga in these very early stages of life, it's mostly them witnessing, them doing it with you, you introducing touch, and them more copying you a little bit. Like maybe they're just rolling around on the mat, and then eventually they start doing a down dog when you do a down dog. And I've got a really cool experience, I think, and especially as we begin to explore this digital platform a little bit more with our videos and the way that we're having to record and supply content, we've also seen this beautiful development of social media and Instagram, and getting to almost watch these children who you don't even know grow up. And I specifically follow 2 different yogis who it's been incredible to watch their journey. I almost feel like I would give their baby a hug when I first saw them, because I feel like I almost know the child. I obviously don't. But I'd like to highlight Rachel Branna, Island Yoga Girl, and also Ashley Gavin and Josh Kramer. So both have very young children who have grown up in yoga. Both of these people are full-time yoga instructors. Island Yoga Girl, she has a whole school, a whole thing, so it is very the center of their life. And you watch these babies as they watch mom and dad, and they watch and they begin to mimic, and then they begin to play, and then they begin to crawl on you and climb and develop these skills with you on your mat. So then the kids develop a little more, and we've got them into this little bit of a different stage, 3 to 7, where they're starting to be a little bit more independent, a little bit more playful. And so then as yoga teachers, we can begin to facilitate this developmental stage as well by providing classes for them with a lot of play and a lot of fun. To ask a child to sit Indian style on the mat and meditate you're going to be pulling your hair out at the end. It's not necessarily going to work. But using different kinds of techniques like flower breathing, or different kinds of maybe pranayamas that are a little bit silly or a little bit fun, can make the atmosphere very playful and make it very much more open to them. And so again, we plant this seed of awareness, the bija, the seed. And once that seed gets planted, it begins to grow and grow and grow. And we've instilled these principles without necessarily teaching them, without necessarily defining them, but giving them a taste and giving them a seed, so that this can begin to develop and grow as they grow into adolescence, where we really do find a lot more confusion, a lot of hormonal changes, a lot of development in muscle mass, these types of things, and especially the social. As we move on into the stage of teenager, life gets a lot harder. We've all experienced that. And the crazy hormonal changes and the social pressure of high school. If we send our kids there with no awareness of what we can do for ourselves, of this pruning of neural pathways, what's healthy, what's hindering, how can we support ourselves, support our goals, and know that it's okay. So this is what we begin to develop with kids through playful yoga. And I know one game that I think is really fun to play with kids. My mom used to do this in her Spanish class, actually, and I've seen people do it in yoga classes with teddy bears or beanie babies, and you can pull out different animals, and there's poses associated with those animals. Cow pose, cat pose, lizard pose, pigeon pose, things like this. So you can teach the poses in really fun ways with beanie babies and things like that. So there's a lot of different ways that we can adapt a regular yoga practice and take these poses into something a little bit more challenging or different, like yoga for kids, because they're not going to be able to just do a yoga sequence for an hour. It not only won't work, it's not going to be beneficial. It's not going to plant that seed that makes them fall in love. And it's not going to bring us success. So what we do is we explore a little bit deeper. We dive into the research on these developmental stages to feed what's happening in their brain, to feed what's happening in their body. So while this discussion is really more of an overview of certain key points of these developmental phases, what really is the intention here is to dive in. What area of focus do you want to be in? What stage of life speaks to you the most, that you feel that you have the most to offer? And then we can begin to specialize and refine our skill with more and more research and more training, but understanding what stage of life we're in. What are the big developmental milestones that are happening there? What are the biggest challenges? And what are sometimes the biggest challenge, especially when we talk about infancy and younger children, is the support network and the socioeconomic factors surrounding it. So there's a lot of things that we can do as educators, as teachers, to facilitate this. And we can do this on a very personal level. We can go to a yoga studio or a yoga clinic and say, you know, I want to hold a workshop for kids, or I want to hold a weekly class for kids. Say we get 20 kids who come to that class. That's not really the reach we're going for. Yes, and that is amazing. We have impacted 20 lives, and from that, 40 more because of their parents, and 60 more because of the grandparents. So that was bad math, but it's exponential, the amount of lives that we impact, even from something small, quote unquote, like a regular weekend class. But how can we as leaders move into this area? How can we bring yoga into schools? How can we use this research to build a financial and a business plan to take to a principal, to take to a superintendent and say, I have something to offer you, and I have a team to do it. And I know that because of this research, and this research, this will be beneficial, and I want to do it here. And I say schools, but it can even start earlier. We see so much benefit in every stage of life, from the very beginning of infancy, touch, massage, mothers working with their children, babies watching mommies do yoga, all of these different ways that we can engage even infants. And then as they get older and older, we can engage them more and more in different ways as their development begins to evolve. So maybe even we take it further. Maybe you want to work with even younger children. How can I bring this into daycares? How can I bring this into schools? Maybe mommy and me programs where you're working with the moms instead of just working with the children, because it will diffuse down to the babies as we begin to allow our students to find this connection to yoga, find this connection to the 8 limbs, and not just the asana, the science, the philosophy, the meaning, the vastness of this realignment. I personally, this week, I've been under a lot of stress, and I was completely out of alignment, and I couldn't move my neck. My arm went numb and cold, and I wasn't pleasant. I couldn't find the will to be nice on the phone, and my job, I wasn't reaching out to friends, and I was very unhappy. I got realigned. You know, I had to go to a chiropractor, and then I did a yoga practice. My body's feeling strong again, and I feel the ability to communicate with myself along this pathway of chakras, of the neurocenters, of the grouping of organs, the grouping of nerves that communicate through my whole body. So even giving that to our students can give that to kids, but we want to focus. How can we better target this developmental stage? How can we better tune in to what's needed, to what they're looking for, and how can we plant the seed of yoga as we move through these developmental patterns? So I challenge you to decide what speaks to you. What demographic are you most interested, or what stage of development, I should say that more accurate, what stage of development are you most interested in working with? Maybe journal, maybe write it down right now. Maybe brainstorm, maybe you don't know. Do some more research, pull out a book. We had another discussion that is another video we've released as a part of the developmental stages intensive weekend, and may be made available in different avenues to you on a book about the different life cycles. Bad for video quality. Hold 1 second. The Essentials of Lifespan. So this has been a great book for my research to put together a little bit of this information and then to dive deeper. We talk a lot about speaking to your population. So if you're walking into a board meeting, because that may be the way that it has to be done. You know, you're like, I really want to bring yoga to schools. I think that children have so much to benefit if I were able to work with, let's say, elementary school kids, and you come up with a plan. This is how I would want to do it. This is how much it would cost. This is how many teachers I would need. And this is why it's beneficial. If you're going to present that at a board meeting, you need the research. You need to have a plan of what to say. You need to be able to communicate on their level of understanding. So we want to put in that research and want to put in the work so that we can communicate on that level and we can show people the benefit without telling them. We want to show them. So that about wraps up our discussion for today. So I do challenge you to take action, to think a little bit more on what developmental stage most interests you. Where do you feel like you have something to offer? And begin doing the research. Begin thinking bigger. Where can you take this? Thank you guys.